31% from the field.
31% from three. 18% from three. Hold on, bro. Hold on. Pause this. Pause this. 7 worst players of the 2022 playoffs, man. Let's see what's on this list, man. This is interesting. Let's see what's on this list.
These are not the worst players in the NBA. They just disappointed us the most. Here are 7 stars who heavily underperformed in the 2022 NBA playoffs.
Everything's going to be on this list. KD going to definitely be on this list.
For the first time in franchise history, the Minnesota Timberwolves had a big 3, or so they thought. Young Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns played very well in the playoffs against Memphis, and at moments, it's fair to say they were spectacular. Edwards averaged 25 points in his first playoff appearance, shooting over 40% from 3. Cat averaged 22 and 10, shooting 45% from 3, and further making the case as the best shooting center of all time. However, the last part of their big 3 was MIA. D'Angelo Russell averaged just 12 points per game on a horrendous 32% shooting. In the deciding Game 6, the Timberwolves coach benched D'Angelo in the 4th quarter, and we can hardly blame him. Russell couldn't buy a bucket and was a non-factor on the defensive end. His future in Minnesota seems extremely uncertain. Donovan Mitchell. For a player with supreme athleticism,
oh my God, he's like
long arms and quick feet, Donovan Mitchell is a horrible defender. He's been a subpar defender his whole career, but his lack of defensive effort has been masked by his great offensive output, but not in the 2022 playoffs. The Utah Jazz lost the series against the Mavs, who had no business winning 2 games without their best and most important player, but they did, thanks to the worst perimeter defense we've seen in these playoffs. Utah's guards and wings looked like they couldn't contain a grandma strolling through the park, let alone Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie driving towards the rim. Their defense collapsed too early and too often, leaving the poor Rudy Gobert to either leave a wide-open dunk or a wide-open 3. Naturally, he stayed in the paint and then rotated to the open 3, but it was useless.
What he average?
Game 2, the Mavs made a franchise record 22 threes, and of those 22 makes, 17 were uncontested, the most by any team in the history of the NBA. Offensively, Donovan had high-scoring games, and he did average 25 points in the series. He was often forcing it. Too many times he dribbled the ball for the entire possession and jacked up tough, uncontested jumpers. Spider shot just 39% from the field.
That percentage, though.
20% from 3.
That percentage, though.
That he can be a capable playmaker in the pick and roll, but in these playoffs, we saw very little of his passing. What was especially painful to watch was his on-court relationship with Gobert. Rudy is far from a great post scorer, but Donovan often didn't pass him the ball when Gobert was wide open for a dunk. We expected another leap from Donovan after he shined in the 2020 playoffs, but he regressed and is arguably one of the most overrated superstars in the NBA.
Ooh, that's a bold
James Harden.
We gotta put my boy Harden. Come on, bro. He hurt, bro.
Unstoppable offensive moves in the NBA, and there are multiple reasons why Harden was so effective. Supreme ball control and silky dribbling, paired with exceptional strength, low center of gravity, and an elite first step, allowed Harden to create an advantage against pretty much anybody. James's playmaking mastery and the tendency to find an open 3-point shooter limited the amount of help the defenses could provide on his drives. And if all else failed, he could take his patented step-back 3s or initiate contact to draw the foul. Harden's left drive was such a powerful weapon that it guaranteed a playoff berth and at least a couple of wins in the playoffs. That is simply not the case anymore. Harden's first step disappeared. For the majority of the 2022 season, James couldn't get past his defender. His step-back 3 was not falling, and his effective field goal percentage dropped by 7%. However, the Beard is still a top-notch playmaker. Harden's ability to push the ball through a forest of hands into the narrowest of spaces is at the very top of the league, and he showcased his splendid passing in the series against the Raptors, where he dissected Toronto's defense with 10 assists per game. However, in the second round against the Heat, in the absence of Joel Embiid, his scoring was desperately needed, but Harden wasn't able to deliver. And the problem was not missing shots, but how passive and harmless he was offensively. Harden was murdered by Jimmy Butler. He hurt. 2 shot attempts in the second half of the deciding Game 6. Throughout the series, James averaged only 12 shot attempts per game and hit only 40% of them. At the age of 33, he showed a worrisome lack of burst and declining athleticism. Will he ever get back to the high-scoring James Harden from Houston?
Trae Young. You didn't mention one time that he
plays for a mediocre team that barely made the playoffs. Nobody expects him to advance past the #1 seed. However, nobody expects him to look completely harmless either. In the 2021 playoffs, Trae Young was one of the biggest stars, averaging 29 points and 9.5 assists per game. In the 2022 playoffs, he played perhaps the 5 worst games of his career. Young made only 22 field goals in the entire series against the Heat, with the abysmal shooting of 31% from the field.
31% from 3. 18% from 3. Hold on, bro. Hold on. Pause this. Pause this. Trae, 18% from 3. Boy, you supposed to be the next Curry. 18% from 3. We gonna let it, you know what? We gonna act like we didn't see that. Let's keep it moving.
Assists as turnovers. In the 76 games he played in the regular season, Trae had only one game where he scored less than 13 points. In the series against the Heat, he had 3.
Oh my God, you just dog water.
Didn't stand a chance. Big credit to Miami's defense, who had done a brilliant job on Young. Trae's killer three-point shooting, floaters, and slash and kick game is the driving force behind the Atlanta offense. Heat's coach Eric Spoelstra knew that to stop the Hawks, he needed to stop Young's pick-and-roll wizardry. Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, and PJ Tucker all aggressively switched on to Trae. They completely took away his drives to the basket and forced him to take tough contested jumpers. Young said that he hasn't been defended like that since high school, and he couldn't find a way to unlock the Heat's defense. Trae looked so overwhelmed and helpless, and it's fair to say he played the worst stretch of basketball of his 4-year career. To be fair, Trae's main pick-and-roll partner Clint Capella was out for almost the entire series, while Collins and Bogdanovich played through injury. Even at full strength, the Hawks were a heavy underdog, and it would be a miracle if they advanced. Instead of constantly playing with the ball, Trae should take a page out of Steph Curry's playbook. He needs to play more as a spot-up shooter, running through screens, and be involved in more handoff actions. This would make Atlanta's game plan much more varied and unpredictable, and it would be harder for defenses to guard him. Young and the Hawks got a lesson from the Heat. Now it remains to be seen if they will learn anything from it.
Chris Paul. Chris Paul?
He's playing well.
Well, you did get knocked out the first round, boy.
Nobody is saying anything to him. Why not? Patrick Beverley heavily criticized Chris Paul during his guest appearance on ESPN, and despite the obvious
I remember that.
They have to admit that he was kind of right. Chris Paul did play like a point guard in the first round of the playoffs against New Orleans. After Devin Booker got injured in Game 2, CP3 single-handedly won Game 3 with 19 points in the fourth quarter, finishing the game with 28 points, 14 assists, and 0 turnovers. In the deciding Game 6, he was perfect, literally. Paul led the Suns to victory with 33 points on 14 for 14 shooting from the field, plus 4 for 4 from the foul line. It was an NBA playoff record for most points without a miss, and Paul was one of the best performers in the first round of the playoffs. In the second round against the Mavs, Paul and the Suns got to a great start. They took a 2-0 series lead, with CP3 orchestrating the offense, averaging 23 points on 60% shooting.
That nigga was getting off.
In the final 5 games of the series, he was held to 13 points or fewer, and turned the ball over 3.6 times per game, with less than 6 assists per contest.
Hey, yo, that's 6 assists. That's less than 6
the only
assists
thing that would explain such a huge drop-off in performance. We understand that CP3 is 37 years old, but he has a long history of big playoff flops. And because they got blown out so badly on their home court, this one left arguably the worst aftertaste of them all. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving.
Of course. No,
that's
not Kyrie.
NBA
Kevin
season,
Durant.
Bookmakers gave the Brooklyn Nets the best chance of winning the title. And before the start of the playoffs, despite all the injuries, Kyrie's absence, losing James Harden, and Ben Simmons sitting out, the Nets were still considered one of the main favorites. The biggest reason for that was Kevin Durant. In the 55 regular season games he played, Durant looked like the best player in the NBA. With KD in the lineup, the Nets won 65% of their games, which would be enough for first place in the East. Without him, they won only 29%, which would rank near the bottom of the league. KD was dropping buckets on everybody, using his masterful isolation skills to win games for the Nets. But against Boston, the quote-unquote best scorer in the game stopped scoring. The Celtics pushed him around, blocked his movement, and didn't allow him to get to the ball. When he did have it, they swarmed him with multiple defenders. He played extremely poorly in the first game and was close to useless in games 2 and 3. The Nets tried to get him open with pin-down screens, post-ups, a lot of isolation, but nothing worked. Every Celtics player was his primary defender at one time. Even the small Peyton Pritchard guarded him for a few possessions.
You got clipped by Pritchard?
KD. Nobody on the Celtics got tired. Durant tried to figure out scoring strategies against so many different coverages and was aggressive enough in Game 4, but it was too late. The Celtics swept the Nets, and KD had the worst shooting performance of his career. For the series, he made only 38% of his shots, 33% behind the arc. With KD struggling, Kyrie Irving's mediocre performance flew under the radar. Kyrie was spectacular in Game 1, almost winning the game by himself with 39 points. But after that, he played uninspired basketball for the rest of the series, averaging just 15 points in the next 3 games. Despite the common belief that the Nets role players didn't play well enough, it wasn't the case. Nobody except Blake Griffin shot below 55%, and other than Drummond and Claxton's troubles from the free throw line, they all played as expected or even better. It's true that Boston had the #1 defense in the NBA, but Jimmy Butler played spectacularly against the same team.
I'm more disappointed in Kyrie. I mean, KD though, man. Kyrie's not regarded as one of the greatest scorers of all time. I'm more disappointed in KD, man. Let me know who's the worst on this list to you, man. But I hope y'all boys enjoy the video. If you watch this right now, appreciate you. See you in the next video, bro. Out.